In this video, I just want to go through some of the changes that I've made to the bike in order to make it more suited to myself and to this tour. I've just stopped here under the shade because it's very hot today and there's lots of flies. And even the mad dogs have found somewhere to sleep in the shade. So I'm just going to do a bit of filming, and I've stopped here in this little road because I'm pretty certain nothing is going to come along and disturb me. This is the bike that I brought with me on my tour. It's an e-bike, a Specialized Turbo Vado 4.0. It has a 710 watt-hour battery and a 70 Newton-meter motor. I'll start with the touch points. When I first got the bike, the handlebars were 700 millimeters wide, and I found those rather too wide. It gave me quite a broad stance. So I cut 40 millimeters off of the end of each bar, and now they're 620 millimeters wide. That I find much better. In fact, I wouldn't mind going a bit narrower. But the controls on the bike won't go in any further, so I can't really narrow them anymore. However, I'm reasonably satisfied with the way they are at the moment. I did have some issues with the controls. When I first got the bike, the gear change lever was outboard of the brake lever. That caused me problems in that these gear levers stuck out into the hand grip area, and I kept knocking those and accidentally changing gears. It was also a bit more of a stretch for me to get to the brake levers. So all I've done here is I've swapped these around. I put the brake lever outboard of the gear lever, and now these are more out of the way, so I hardly ever accidentally change gear now. And I've done the same on this side. I've put the motor controller on the inside and the brake lever on the outermost part of the bars. Next, I'll talk about the saddle. This is the stock saddle. It's a Specialized Revo, and it's the one that came with the bike. And to be honest, I found it okay. I've done rides of over 100 kilometers and it's been fine. Now I was thinking, should I swap this out for my Brooks C17? But in the end I decided not to. And that's because I wanted to keep as much of this bike stock as possible. That's because later on I want to do a fuller review of the bike, and in order to review it properly I wanted to bring it on this tour. So I kept the saddle on there in order to keep it as stock as possible. The same is true of the seat pin. Now I'm not keen on this seat pin for a couple of reasons, and in fact I have an alternative but I haven't replaced it, so I again kept it stock. The next touch point were the pedals. Now the original pedals on the Turbo Vado were just some plastic jobs, and the bearings in them weren't very good. So I replaced them, and I made a video about those. The bearings on them weren't very good, and in the end they started wobbling so much I lacked confidence in bringing them on this holiday. So I bought this set of MKS pedals instead. I've also put these little half toe clips on there just to give my foot a bit more security. Enough of the touch points. I've changed the gearing. I've modified this cassette, and I've previously made a video about that, from a 11 to 42 cassette, and now I've got a 14 to 42 tooth on there. That helps out in that I can have closer ratio gears, particularly in the high gears, where I'm more likely to be using the bike when it goes above its cut-off speed. Having those gear ratios closer together is preferable for me. It does cut down on my maximum speed. To be honest, I don't really care. I'm more than happy just to roll down the hills rather than pedal at high speed. I have put a new chain on here, and I did that because the previous one had done about 1,500 kilometers and was showing a bit of wear. So I thought I'd put a new one on for this ride. I have brought some additional lubricant I can put on this should I need to. Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. The other thing that I've done is I've changed the chain wheel on the front.
Originally, the Turbo Vado came with a 48-tooth chain wheel and 42-tooth on the rear. I wasn't that confident that I would have low enough gearing for some of the steep hills that I was about to encounter on this holiday. So what I've done is I've changed the 48-tooth chain wheel on the front for a 44-tooth chain wheel. That drops the gearing by about 10%, which is about 1-to-1 gearing. Now that's a bit more what I would like. In fact, I could go a bit lower really, because on the first day of this holiday, I went up a pretty steep hill. It was registering 18% on my Garmin.
I'm glad I put that 44-tooth chainring on, because now I'm in my bottom gear. And I admit I was struggling getting up there in the lowest gear, even with the motor on its full power. Now that's partly because the gear isn't low enough for me to maintain my cadence. For this motor to work efficiently, the rider needs to be pedalling at a cadence between 70 and 100 RPM. And on that hill, my cadence was dropping down to around about 50 RPM. So the motor power had dropped off quite a lot. If I had an even lower gear, I may have been able to raise my cadence and the motor would have given me more assistance. But that was only that one hill. Otherwise, it's been fine. I've changed the original butyl tubes that were in the tyres for TPU tubes. My 2 spare TPU tubes are here on the left, and when you compare the size of those to the original butyl tubes, there's quite a space saving. The weight saving is equally as impressive. 2 tubes in the wheels and 2 spares saves about a kilogramming. Not only that, having the TPU tubes means that they pack into much smaller space. This is my toolkit, and not only does it have tools in there, but it's also got 2 spare TPU tubes. So that's the reason I went for TPU instead of leaving the original butyl in there. Despite some horror stories on the internet, I decided to keep the original Specialized Pathfinder Sport tyres. I've added a pump. I do have an electric pump, which I made a video about, but I put this on as an emergency just in case the mini pump breaks down. Now, the Turbo Vado didn't come with any water bottle cage bosses on the seat tube. I wanted 2 water bottles, so I've put this strap-on water bottle cage on here, so I can now have 2 water bottles. Another final thing that I've done is that I mounted my Garmin on top of my handlebar bag, basically because there's not really enough room to mount it in here. So those are the minor modifications I made to my Turbo Vado for this tour. I'll talk about the luggage in a different video. In the future, I'll make a video that will give a more of a deeper review into this bike and how it performed on this holiday and for more general riding. If you want to see those videos, then consider subscribing to my channel. And if you've liked this content, or even if you haven't, please give it a thumbs up. From me until the next video, it's goodbye.